Welcome, everybody, to Bullets to Bibles.
Hi, everyone.
I'm Tony, and you are?
Dawn, and it is a very, very chilly, below 0 here.
It's like minus 11 tonight. No reason not to snuggle.
But we hope hearts are warm, that's for sure.
Today, we have a very special guest. I'm honored to have Mr. Sam Faddis on with us today. Sam has an incredible career. He's a brother, a Christian brother. He is a former soldier and CIA operations officer, and he's got a lot to talk about today. So, Dawn, I'll turn it over to you, and you can talk a little bit about his bio, etc.
Welcome, Sam, to Bullets to Bibles. It is a great privilege to have you. I think our audience is going to be equally as wowed by what you are going to offer as I was whenever I was reading through your resume. There's just so much here, and I was truly struggling to keep up with all of the experiences that you have. So I'm going to try to summarize it and do you honor, but you've served 20 years in the Central Intelligence Agency as an operations officer, and presently you are the senior editor of Substack magazine, which covers national security, politics, and intelligence-related topics. You are part of the Pennsylvania Patriot Coalition, the president, more specifically, of that, the senior fellow for Senior Center for Security Police presently, and you are a member of the committee Present Danger China. In addition to that, some of your experience with the CIA in training, you have counterintelligence in your background, Chief CIA's Terrorist Weapons of Mass Destruction Unit. There's some time in the Middle East. You were also a Judge Advocate General for the Army, an Assistant Attorney General in the state of Washington. There's just so much here. You're tested in 2 different languages. In addition, you authored 4 books, and about a year ago, you did a presentation at Hillsdale College on the rise and fall of the CIA, which I found fascinating, and I can't wait for you to share some of that, Sam, with our audience today. So thank you again, and we're very grateful for your service and all of the above that you've been able to contribute to this country.
Thank you guys for having me. Happy to be here.
So, as always, we're going to start out with a Bible scripture, and it's Proverbs 18. A lot of wisdom here. But Proverbs 18, 2, a fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself. Fools don't understand anything. A lot of fools walking around nowadays. I'm not condemning, I am evaluating, and I'm evaluating appropriately. A lot of fools walking around, they don't seek wisdom, they create it. So, Sam, a lot to talk about. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in a very short amount of time today. I'd like to say that this is a part 1 of a part 2 show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, brother, we've gone ahead and elected a new president. He was inaugurated yesterday, 47th president of the United States, Donald Trump.
Round 2.
Believe me, they tried to kill him. They didn't get him. I would like to say he's on God's mission for us.
Well, if you remember, part of the inauguration yesterday, he made it very clear that he believed that God saved him for this time.
Yeah.
That was directly from him.
Well, I think it's an incredibly encouraging event, and many of us have worked, a long hours making this happen. The only thing I would caution people is, okay, this is a great development and a dramatic step forward, but please don't sit down on the couch and take a nap and think that this guy's going to do this all by himself, or we just won the war. Okay, that's a tremendous victory, but we got a lot of battles to fight yet, and we're going to need everybody involved.
It's all time to step up, Sam. Yeah, I mean, to your point, and there's a lot to unpack for this show. So we talked about the president, the ever evolving state of Iran, the intelligence gathering, analyzing processes that are going on that's going on right now. You have the drones flying everywhere with no rationale whatsoever. Certainly, with the what kind of credibility goes along with that. And then we have the state of politics in this country, especially in the state and the grassroots movement. So, Sam, let me ask you a question. When it comes to intelligence gathering and how we're decomposing and gathering intelligence right now, what's the current state of that right now?
Terrible. I mean, we're flat on our backsides. I mean, look, we've talk about the Central Intelligence Agency. The Central Intelligence Agency, the pace of operations is a fraction of what it was when I was serving. A fraction as in they're moving at maybe 10% of the speed. The number of sources is maybe 10% what it was. We have taken an organization that was supposed to be really quick and flexible and adaptive and all this stuff and turned it into a big ponderous bureaucracy. And then we have added to that the whole business of DEI and promoting people based on all sorts of considerations that have nothing to do with mission accomplishment. Put people in positions of leadership that have never run operations, have never been downrange, try never to leave Northern Virginia. So, you start talking about the Iranian threat, the Iranian nuclear program. People are talking all the time about how we should preemptively hit Iran. My first question is, you're going to take out a secret nuclear weapons program. Presumably the Iranians are actively hiding that program, right? These are smart boys in my experience. So what intelligence do you think you possess that tells you where all the components of that program are? It's one thing to start talking about bunker buster bombs and all the kinetic aspects, but all of that is predicated on the assumption that somebody can tell you what it is you got to blow up. Who would that be exactly that you think has that intelligence? Because we have destroyed that capability. And a lot of these adversaries are smart enough to know that, look, they learned a long time ago about our electronic warfare capabilities, our electronic intercept capabilities, more accurately. So, nobody's getting on a cell phone in Iran and talking about the secret location of the nuclear weapons facility. Nobody's sending emails about that subject. They learned that stuff a long time ago. So, apply that to terrorist threats inside the United States. Who do you think exactly it is that's penetrated all these organizations and can tell you who's going to blow up something tomorrow? Who would that be? I mean, pre 9/11, we were producing intel reports that said we don't have any current intelligence saying there's a terrorist threat, right? You could have been reading those reports on September 10th. Didn't change the fact that there was an active plot. It just meant we didn't know a damn thing about it. So,
Sam, what I've always had a hard time with, I mean, we all are part of another country. I mean, there's been a lot of immigration into this country forever. I mean, that's what it's built on. And we've been attacked. People have been killed on our soil. Mm-hmm. But the borders remain open with no kind of, there's no checks and balances, really. People are coming across north, south, not really being, looked at. And then to think that we've let the good guys in. I mean, a lot of people that have come across the border, sure, they've come across in the appropriate manners, but many of them have not. And that's what scares me. We've been attacked. People have been killed. The next attack is waiting. And we've let these people into our country. Why has this happened?
Well, I mean, the key thing for people to understand on this issue, in my estimation, and on a lot of other issues, is you are not talking about incompetence. I mean, there may be incompetence to spare, but it's not like people have been trying for the last 4 years to secure the border and they just can't figure out how to do it. That's not what's happening. A deliberate policy decision was made when Joe Biden sat down to turn off all the measures that Donald Trump had in place, the Remain in Mexico. We adopted as our official policy of the State Department during the Biden years was to ensure safe and effective migration. Mm. So if you think the policy was to control the border, but we were screwing it up, that's all wrong. Not only were the borders open, but we've been operating. I mean, there are camps all across Central America that move people north to the border. They're run by various non-governmental organizations, NGOs, usually under the auspices of the UN. Okay, but who pays for them? We pay for them. So that's all a fig leaf. The American taxpayer has been paying for a conveyor belt to bring people into the country. Then actively, our government has taken away any semblance of any mechanism for controlling who crosses the border. And then actually half the time you're paying to fly them from the border camp to Chicago or New York or wherever they were going. So it's exactly the opposite of we were trying to keep them out and failing. We have been bringing them in. And, in terms of screening, I hear this term all the time. We're screening people at the border. It's like, okay, cut the nonsense, right? What does that mean? There's a Syrian dude at the border. You ask him 5 questions. I'm not making that up. That's actually the protocol, has been the protocol. 5 questions, they're standard questions, the same questions for every person. So big surprise, everybody knows what the 5 questions are. In fact, the guys you pay to move you to the border when you're coming in tell you what the 5 questions are and prep you for the answers. And the reason that was done was because they wanted to, and this is official, reduce the processing time for each person to no more than 15 minutes.
So get as many in as we can.
Precisely. So the objective is not find out if they're good or bad, it's get it over with and get them in. Now, again, okay, so the 5 questions are known. The dude's carrying a passport. Who knows if that's him, not him? You can buy passports in the market all over the Middle East for nothing. We used to do that all the time for assets, where we weren't going to give them our own set of false docs. Just send him down to the souk, this marketplace, hand him $500. He buys a full set of false identity documents. Okay, he says he's Syrian, his passport's from Syria. There hasn't been an effective national government in Syria for years. We don't have that dude's name in our computer database. Where would that information come from?
Right.
What, are you going to query the Syrian government from the border? What Syrian government? They're not talking to us. In other words, it doesn't matter what he says to you. What are you checking it against? You have nothing to check it against. It has been a completely meaningless exercise. And this, by the way, is only the people that you caught, or actually more regularly these days, turned themselves in. The guys that wandered through the desert and you never touched, obviously didn't even ask them those questions. So in effect, what I'm saying is there is no screening, there is no barrier. If you can make it to the border and walk across, you're in. That could be everybody. Yes, most of them I'm sure are good people. Doesn't mean they should stay here because they came in illegally. That's not what I'm saying. But in that herd of people, how many bad guys came? Nobody can. They'll give you numbers. The numbers are meaningless because what would they be based on? They have no clue. None.
So I have a question with 2 parts. Why? What's the gain? 2, is there something that we as civilians need to be aware of and maybe even do to protect ourselves?
Well, I mean, why? Because the people that created the policy under the Biden administration philosophically, ideologically believe we're the bad guys, there shouldn't be borders, we don't have a right to control our own territory, right? That's straight up. Now, the people that run all the NGOs that created that ideology all live in walled compounds somewhere with lots of money and lots of security. So they don't really care about any of this, but make no mistake, it's an ideological thing. We are the bad colonial settler, paternalistic, heteronormative society that deserves to be destroyed. We don't have any right to stop them. As citizens, I mean, what can you do? First of all, acknowledge that the threat exists, like be alert and be aware, and don't operate with the illusion that somebody somewhere is stopping bad people from coming into the country. Understand that I mean, what you saw in Bourbon Street, as horrifying as it was, is nothing. I mean, again, I'm not minimizing the loss, the people that died, nothing but sympathy. But the point is, a guy driving a truck down a street compared to the scope of what these guys want to do. I mean, keep in mind, Al-Qaeda never intended 9/11 to have set the bar. That was never the worst day in their estimation. They for years had, and I presume still do have, weapons of mass destruction programs, chemical, biological, nuclear, radiological. So what they hope for, pray for, is the day where they can kill Americans by the tens of thousands, not 3,000 people, roughly.
You listen to some of the other credible, in my personal opinion, credible podcasts. I know Dawn and I do quite a bit. There's a former CIA targeter on one of them, and she has stated that they're here. They're just going through the wickets of training, but once they get proficient and they're ready to go, they're going to start unleashing. And it is an NBC type environment, nuclear, biological, chemical.
Well,
and
look,
there are nuclear weapons that are warheads that are missing. There are biological agents and chemical agents that are readily available. I mean, they've got, what I didn't realize is that they've got their own chemists.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have laboratories where they're currently working, apparently. And so she stated they are, in her words, I believe, they were working. They were working. They were having some effectiveness in what they were doing. So, you know, to that point, Sam, what is your experience with any of that?
So, for the record, I don't know the lady in question. I'm familiar with the reports, and therefore, I don't know the accuracy of her information. But the point is, it's true nonetheless, I guess, is what I would say, is in my experience, look, this has been an ongoing fight for a long time. So, in my experience, personally, operationally, I was involved in an operation to take apart a program which I'm dancing around in my head here to remember where the lines are in terms of classification. I was personally involved in a team to take apart an effort by Al-Qaeda to acquire nuclear weapons. That was a real-world program underway, which we dismantled. I have personally recovered very hot radiological material in the field that was in the hands of bad guys. The radiological material that, when we recovered it in a remote area, we buried 4 feet in the ground and then had to bring in a former member of one of our nest teams to handle getting it into a suitable container for transport. It was that hot. The guy we took it off of died not too long after because he'd been carrying it in his pocket. Taken apart, again, personally, and don't take this as like I was the only guy doing this, taken apart programs where there were active chem bio labs, and yes, they were already producing lethal material when we took them apart. Overseen, you know, one of the people apprehended while I was running the terrorist weapons of mass destruction unit was Afia Siddiqui, who's now sitting in federal prison. Well, Afia Siddiqui is a very smart lady who had been involved in an effort to steal biological material from Plum Island, which is was at the time a very secure biolab off Long Island, basically, where the most dangerous organisms in the world were. So she was involved in a real-world Al-Qaeda plot to steal that stuff, to stage biological attacks in New York City, and they were already casing the targets. So it wasn't like a couple of guys in Pakistan sitting around smoking the hookah and thinking this would be cool. They were here on the ground casing targets, had identified where they were getting the material from, and we're talking things like anthrax and so forth. So that's just off the top of my head stuff that I personally have been involved in. but the kind of stuff was happening all the time and still is happening all the time. So it's not a fantasy that they have. When we went into Afghanistan, there were, if memory serves, 2 separate chemical weapons programs on the ground in progress by Al-Qaeda that we dismantled. So give you an idea that this is the scope of what they've been doing, and they've never walked away from that. Neither has ISIS or anybody else. It's not like they can't figure it out. I mean, talk about nuclear weapons. We detonated the first nuke in 1945.
Right.
That was a while ago. I mean, the North Koreans have figured out how to build nuclear weapons. It's not like 2 guys in lab coats somewhere know how to make these things. The Pakistanis have something like 200 of them. Who the heck knows where they are on any given day? And just to complete the horror show, as long as I'm doing the Grim Reaper thing here, I mean, if you take a modern nuclear weapon like we put on cruise missiles, you're talking, sticking to unclassified parameters, you're talking maybe something that weighs max 300 pounds, somewhere between 200 and 300 pounds, and it's about 3 feet long and about 15, 16 inches in diameter. In other words, you can throw it in the trunk of a pretty small car. It's not has to come in a tractor trailer. Now take that against what we just were talking about the border, with everybody and his brother coming across the border, and they find tractor trailers filled with illegals. And then try to look me in the face and tell me no nuclear weapons came across that border. Come on, that's ridiculous.
Sounds like in your opinion, sounds like we're in trouble.
Yeah, well, so back to I think my point of departure before I went off and depressed even me, was just because Donald Trump sat down in the White House, okay, that's great. It's a heck of a lot better than the day before. But think how long it's going to take to dig out from that. We had no intelligence collection. We've let all these guys in the country. We don't even know where the heck all these people are. I mean, they were giving them notices for hearings. I mean, if you show yourself and you say I'm a refugee and make any kind of claim, they let you loose. And they give you what's called a notice to appear. I should say they were doing this. That's where you go to a hearing. But then you're allowed to come in the United States pending your hearing. So until your hearing, you can hang out. Now, that's already kind of crazy, because if we don't know if you should be here at all, I don't know why we let you in. But we got to the point where those dates on those hearing notices are like 10 years into the future. So they're handing you a piece of paper and saying, show up for court 10 years from now. Bye. And then you give them some address where you may have a cousin in Chicago. So the chances, and nobody verifies that that's your cousin or they're there. That information is useless, right? That's garbage. You gave them an address. They wrote it on a piece of paper. The whole thing took 15 minutes, like I said. Then you're gone. So not like you're checking in with anybody. You were just cut loose.
So, Sam, what would your hope be then? I mean, you've served 2 decades with the CIA. You've been through a number, the organization's been through a number of administrations. And, you referenced that just because Donald Trump gets in now, it might be a small celebration, a small victory of sorts, but certainly not the battle is won by any means. So, Sam, what would your hope be then for a new administration's effects, and then the outcome on how that plays out, specifically to the CIA?
Well, to keep with the CIA and use it as an example, since I worked there for 20 years. But I mean, after I left the agency, I spent another decade working with other parts of the IC and all the military counterintelligence services and all that. But use CIA as an example. I mean, it's great to send in a director, like Director Radcliffe, who represents this administration. CIA is not the biggest organization. I mean, the DOD, the number of people at CIA is a rounding error for the Department of Defense. But the point is, it's still not 5 guys or 500 guys. It's still a big outfit spread out all over the world. So it's great to send in Director Radcliffe, and all respect for him for taking on the job. but he inherits the organization as it currently exists. And it's like he took over a battalion that's in terrible shape and has failed all its evals. And okay, but now he's got to actually fix it. And that doesn't mean just firing people. That might be the first step. Then he's actually got to turn it into an effective machine doing its job. I say to people all the time, the firing people and breaking China thing is kind of the easy part if you have the political will to do it. Okay, that's great. You fired the chief of station in Islamabad, since I was talking about Pakistan, our senior CIA guy in Pakistan. You fired him because he's worthless and hasn't been doing his job. Great. Now you got to replace him with somebody. Got to find somebody that's better. And then he's got to work with all the personnel that are there. And then if they're only running at 10% of the efficiency they should, he's got to transform that place. So somehow or another, and this has got to happen in every agency in the federal government, unless we're going to eliminate them. Department of Education potentially needs to just go away. But if you're FBI, as an example, is roughly 40,000 guys and gals. Unless you're going to erase it and say we don't need a national police force, then after you fire a bunch of people and tell them to stop persecuting average Americans and focus on real threats, you actually have to make them effective again at doing their jobs. They got to go penetrate all those Iranian and Hezbollah cells in the country and do that. So that's a big challenge, and it's going to require, at the end of the day, people that know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like, you can't parachute into CIA never having ever been there or no experience in intelligence, and then just start trying to figure out, how do we recruit sources? How do I get somebody inside Al-Qaeda? How do I do that? And the same would apply for any line of work.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about rebuilding an organization with very specialized people, and then training them up on the processes and procedures that you expect from them in order to bring back the kind of work you expect, or the intel that you expect, or whatever else the CIA does. So it's a lengthy process, but we talked about a lot of issues, and I think this is a good segue right now to politics.
Okay.
People are always talking about, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? Well, it starts with your vote and holding politicians accountable and understanding that they've got Kool-Aid. They're going to try and serve you up. And it's all a stage act. It's a show. I was told when I worked in the Pennsylvania Senate, it's not about, you need to forget about having friends up here. If you want a friend, you get yourself a dog. That's the best way to do it. And the other thing is they don't listen to what they say. You watch what they do. And it starts with people holding politicians accountable. First of all, you don't vote for them because you can't stand the other candidate, or they don't look as good, or whatever, or they don't come from the proverbial people. You have to put a candidate in that represents the security of this country, the welfare of this country, the livelihood that you want your family or your children to have. Then you hold these people accountable. You're not friends with them.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, look, I think if you roll this back to the point of origin, when the founders designed the republic with this, most government was supposed to be local, with very limited very limited authority at the federal level. Even at the state level, very limited authority. It was supposed to be really at the grassroots level. Your township, your county was where most things were supposed to happen. And there was never supposed to be a political class, right? There was never supposed to be a thing like a professional politician. I graduate from college and I run for county council, and then 40 years later, I'm in the U.S. Senate, and I've never done anything but be a politician. It was never supposed to be that way. It was supposed to be more or less all of us taking turns, folks that we knew, participating, part-time legislature, even at the state level. And then along the way, for a variety of reasons, we just let this get totally out of control, right? You don't know the people that represent you. You're lucky if you know the names of the people you're voting for. and you personally are not involved in the process. You don't go to county council meetings or even township meetings or even school board meetings. Somebody else is doing this. Well, so, we created that hell, right? We let it spin on like that, where these people aren't really accountable to us. And yes, they play people, right? They lie to your face.
Tell you what you want to hear, then they expect you to forget about it.
You call them up about the library issue because age-inappropriate books are being made available to little kids, often without their parents even being aware that they're providing them to them. So nobody's talking about banning books, burning books, or any of that nonsense. That's something the other side throws out there because it demonizes you. All you're saying is my third grader shouldn't be reading this graphic novel with big color photos of people performing sexual acts, right? Probably shouldn't ever have it at that age. And he sure as hell you can't give it to him without me knowing about it. Let's just start right there. What are you doing handing pornographic material to my child? These are just basic common sense kind of issues, right?
And the way they control that is by calling you a racist. By calling you somebody that doesn't want to buy into the new norm. That's not my new norm.
You're a racist, you're a transphobe, you're a homophobe, whatever. People ask me all the time when they're talking about getting involved in political activity, but what if they start attacking me? And I'm like, just take the if out, man. What do you mean, what if? If you're countering their narrative, of course they're going to attack you. And yes, all of their attacks are going to be, you're transphobic, you're homophobic, you're whatever phobic. And it doesn't, whether it has any basis in reality is irrelevant. That's not the point. The point is it's useful to them to demonize you.
Right.
But you bring that issue up and you go talk to your state rep. And your state rep says, I feel your pain, I'm with you, brother, and pats you on the back, and then gives you the number of some aide, makes you feel like you're special because you can call directly to one of his helpers, and blows a bunch of smoke about how they're going to study the issue and possible legislation, blah, 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 blah. And then you walk away feeling special and tell all your friends how he listened to you and he was so considerate and they're really taking it seriously. And come on, man, I mean, nothing happens and they never intended for anything to happen. It's just, it's a game. And they play it really effectively. One of the things that frustrates me with the coalition all the time is I'll be talking to some hardcore, hard-driving patriot that's talking all about the establishment and how they're selling us down the river and we got to fight and we can't let them keep lying to us. And then they will engage one time with some state senator or state rep and they will hook, line, and sinker buy that whole shtick. They will just go for it. And one minute they were talking all about how you can't trust any of these guys and we need to throw all the bums out. But now this guy says I'm his friend, so he's legit. You're like, wow, you have been played, man. Did you buy some swampland in Florida too? I mean, a bridge in New York? This is just old school confidence man type crap. I mean, to me, the bottom line for the coalition is what I keep telling people. Stop asking the same people to do the right thing. The same folks you've been asking to do the right thing forever and thinking that they're going to change. The solution is you have to replace them with people who will do the right thing. So roll up your sleeves and get involved in the process. And that's the bottom line. Take your government back.
Well, I know you're doing something about it. I know that you're working with grassroots across Pennsylvania to organize, to do calls to action, to hold these legislators accountable, as opposed to just meeting and greeting at a veterans breakfast or naming bridges and all this other stuff, crap. What are you doing about it? How are you organizing across Pennsylvania right now, Sam?
Well, so a variety of things are going on. So one of the things we're doing as a coalition is every month we have a group of individuals going down and meeting in Harrisburg directly in the state capitol with senators and representatives and holding them accountable. Okay, we were here last month and we were talking to you about this issue and this bill. So where's the bill? What's the status of the bill? It's still in committee. Why is it still in committee? Right? Because you know this game. You write up a bill and you introduce it and you throw it into committee and it never sees the light of day. It never leaves committee. They never wanted it to leave committee. It's never going to get a vote on. Okay, we're done with that. But then also, all out around the state, the focus is, okay, so you got to actually find candidates and run candidates for office. So Jamie Walsh, who just won in Luzerne County, we did a lot of work with. That is not me taking credit for Jamie Walsh winning. The reason Jamie Walsh won is Jamie Walsh and the people running his campaign. But just as an example of the direction. And starting all the way from the school boards to the county council, to, your county commissioners, to your state reps, finding the candidates, building real campaigns, fighting these people. Stop, you show up in Harrisburg and wave your signs. Okay, that's great every once in a while as a demonstration of strength. But the point is, you leave and go home and business as usual returns. You didn't stay, you didn't make any impact. So it's got to change from that. One of the interesting things, by the way, is ever since Jamie won in this last go-round, actually ever since he won the primary, because that was the real contest given the makeup of that district, there's amazing the number of concerned members of the legislature engaging the coalition as a consequence of that victory, which is not the first time a patriot has won, but just the message sent that we're not talking about it. You guys, we're going to remove you one by one. A lot of work, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of sustained effort, but I am very hopeful.
The corruption in Pennsylvania is strong. I think you would agree with that, correct?
Mind-blowing. I was just talking about Jamie, right? Jamie Walsh ran for state rep. And this is the primary. This is his Republican opponent. Asking to meet him for lunch. Jamie sits down with the guy and the guy's campaign manager, and they offer him a roughly $12,000 check to get out of the race and leave, because they said, they billed it as, we'll pay off your campaign debt, and if you'll leave the race, and if you do that, when the your state senator steps down, as we anticipate she will in a couple of years, the party will back you as the chosen successor for her. So take the 12 grand check, sell your soul to us, become our boy, and then we'll get you into the state Senate. To his credit, Jamie said, no way in hell, and then stood up on stage at a debate shortly thereafter and blew the whistle on that and laid it all out for the voters, as he should have, right? He wasn't making it up. Here's my opponent. Tried to buy me out of a race in broad daylight. There's stuff like that happens all the time, and I want to start laughing, not because it's funny, but because it's so outrageous. Like, I want to look at him and say, you got to be kidding me, right? It's 2025, and you guys are still doing this.
And that's a lot of money. You have to wonder what the real return on the investment is with this. I mean, what if they're willing to spend that kind of money and go through the trouble to do all these things? What's the real return here? Why are they doing it? What's really coming back to them?
Look, I'm sure, like you, I have stood at events and I'm looking at a congressman, and, congressmen get paid okay, but the cost of living in D.C. is insane. And if you're living in a district in Pennsylvania and you got to maintain your house in your district and have a place to crash in D.C., even in an apartment, right? That salary doesn't go very far. Real fast, you're going to find that that's not a lot of money anymore. And yet I'm looking at a guy who's been a congressman for 10, 20 years, and he's wearing a gold watch. I can't even imagine what the friggin' thing cost. And a suit, I don't know. I'll never have a suit like that. It looks like $5,000. I'll take a stab in the dark. And his wife is standing next to him, and she's got like $25,000 worth of gold jewelry on.
Frosted.
And I'm like, all standing in the middle of a union hall or something, surrounded by guys that just came from work, all in their car, guys and gals in their Carhartt clothes and work boots, didn't even get a chance to shower. It's February. They're standing on a concrete floor in a warehouse all day or working in a garage or a factory. And this guy's talking about how he's fighting for them. And I'm like, really? Because they and your congressional salary did not buy that suit, bro. I don't, or God, the guy that just left the White House.
Yeah, they came into office with a certain lifestyle. By the time they're pretty much matured into office and come out of office, that lifestyle's certainly changed.
My grandfather was a congressman from southwestern PA back in the 30s and 40s, long time ago. And I remember one time when I was like 16 years old, right after my dad retired from the Navy, we were driving through the county seat down in Greene County, Pennsylvania, which is where he was from. And my father points to my granddad's house. My granddad had passed by that point. And he said, when your granddad retired from Congress, he owned that house and a used Oldsmobile. Now, I was 16 and I was a punk, so probably all I was thinking was, that's great, Pops. Can I have the keys to the car and some money? Because I want to go out tonight, right? I got a date. I always say my dad got smarter with age, but I don't mean his age. I mean my age. There's a lot of stuff Dad said to me that over the years I have thought about and realized that's pretty friggin' smart. And that's one of those things, what he was trying to say to a punk 16-year-old was, he spent a decade, 12 years, whatever it was in Congress, came back and hadn't put any money in his pocket, hadn't set up a job, hadn't used it, all he did was represent his constituents. You could agree with him, not agree with him, right, wrong, and different. The point was, he didn't take money, he didn't get bought, he wasn't in it for himself when he was down there. Unfortunately, those guys are few and far between these days.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, Sam, I have some experience doing some political things as well. And I think the word that I use to describe the political realm is heartbreaking. And that's my word. But for those out there, you've talked about local seats, state seats, federal seats, and politics isn't necessarily a fun place to be. It's it has its disappointments, its seedy places, its dark areas, and for us to have an effect, or for there to be an effect, what would you say to people then to instill hope or encouragement with that? It's great to show up at a Capitol or wherever with your signs and your hats and then take them off after it's over and business as usual, as you said. But what's the key?
Call to action here?
Yeah, what's the key? What's the call to action? What's the hope?
Well, I think first of all, Teddy Roosevelt used to say something to the effect of do what you can where you are with what you have. Okay, meaning stop looking for a silver bullet and stop trying to solve the problem all by yourself. Right in front of everybody is something they can be doing. You don't have to go run for U.S. Senator tomorrow to make a difference. If you got a school board that has a massive amount of impact on your kids, and you can get on that school board or just help somebody else that you believe in get on the school board, right there you made a massive positive impact. And you can run for a school board race, spend almost no money, right? You talk about small numbers of people, and okay, so find something that you can do in terms of battling the discouragement. I've said this a million times to a million different people. I always look at everything that I have done in my life as trying to be worthy of the people that came before me. Right? I just think about what my mother and father went through, my grandparents, and every American has, it's not like the Faddis family is unique. Every family has that, right? My wife's family came here from Poland in the early 1900s. Her grandfather went straight into the mines up in Cambria County and subsequently died of black lung. Now, that's a long frigging disease, and progresses for a long time, and we're talking about a time period when there wasn't much in the way of disability or, in other words, that guy was getting up for years, coughing his lungs out, barely able to breathe, and dragging himself down in the mines to feed his family. And his sons went on to be Marine Corps officers, senior DOD officials, all incredibly, the daughters as well, right, to build that American dream, right? So on some level, it's kind of like, I don't mean this to sound too harsh, but who decided that, like, all the battles were won and all we had to do was sit around on the couch and watch television and enjoy the sacrifices of all those people, right? I don't mean to minimize it, because God knows there are days when I'm dealing with the coalition when I'm thinking, wow, why am I not just hanging out in Greece on the beach, drinking a glass of wine and chilling out? Why? But I mean, that's the price of maintaining what we have. And I think part of the problem we face as a country, and I'm not exempting myself from it, is kind of forgetting that for a long period of time.
Right.
I mean, Gina and I spent almost 20 years straight overseas. I remember when we came back, it took us a few years to settle in when we finally were back in the States permanently. And I remember there was a moment, now this is going to sound very corny, but it's true. We were standing in the kitchen talking about the news or something, having morning coffee, and we both looked at each other and said simultaneously, what happened to the country we've been defending all this time? Where did the United States go? Like, we were listening to something on the news and we thought, I don't understand. We've been out there on the walls guarding this place all this time. Like, what the hell has been happening back here? This is madness. So, I guess it comes down to you're either going to fight for your country or you're going to lose it, right? And
Right.
we just won a major, major victory, and the world has changed. But now is not the time to chill out and take a break. Now's the time to pour it on.
Yeah, we can't rest on the laurels of this win with the new president. We all have to come together and do what we can. I mean,
Yeah.
Sam, we're going to be wrapping up. I know we're running out of time right now. What I wanted to do was talk about your faith. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about your faith and how it's helped you with your life and your aspirations and getting you out of some rough places in your life?
And maybe this is something that we would have to continue on as a part 2, if so. But if you're able to just sort of summarize that, being mindful of sort of the wrap up here, we'd invite you to do that as well, Sam.
Yeah, well, look, I was raised as a Presbyterian, and at least in my brand of Presbyterianism, that meant we sang 2 hymns, there was a responsive reading, there was a sermon, and then we had coffee and donuts, and then we went home and watched football. So in a Scots-Irish family that did not encourage the wearing of emotion or the discussion of emotional issues, right? We were all about, I came from a military family, and my dad's, whatever. We were all about, without ever saying these words, suck it up and get it done, keep moving, that kind of thing. So that's my way of saying that sort of the open emotional spirituality of religion, I don't think is something that I know that it's not something that I grew up with. Over the course of a lot of years, in a lot of places and a lot of experiences, I think I have learned to talk to God directly, if that makes any sense. And I believe that He has answered me. So I don't consider that to be an abstraction, and I don't consider it to be a fairy tale or anything like that. That's, I mean, when people are dying and you are on the are hanging, are in an extremely perilous situation, it focuses your mind. It's not just a matter of, hey, do me a favor, I'll bet on the fact that you'll get me out of this, and so I'll promise you a bunch of crap now that I won't remember tomorrow. It forces you to recognize that, okay, this is a real thing, man, and I will also say that, and this has been probably more true in a strange way since I retired, that I feel like, and you hear this often in the Patriot movement, people say that they recognize that they are being guided by something outside themselves in what they do. Like I was referring to Jamie Walsh earlier, so that comes to mind. If you hear him talk about running for state rep, he was a businessman and running his own business selling gutters, installing gutters on houses. Hated politics, didn't want to come near politics. And then a whole long chain of events led him to the point where he said, if I care about my family and my kids, I have no choice but to get involved and do this. And when he talks about it, he will say, and I don't have any illusion that I arrived at that juncture all by myself. This was not a random series of events that just coincidentally led me to this point. There's no question that there was another hand there. And I have had that same experience. So, does that tee it up enough for the first part of my response?
I think it does. And I'm just going to throw in there again, what you had said specifically right there has been the same thing that we have heard from our previous guests, that they directly felt that they were called by God in some form and guided to a certain place and a point for a purpose. And that also includes Tony, which we put out a little bit of our story, or his story rather, but then mine as the side to Bullets to Bibles. But yes, Sam, that teed it up, but it seems to be a common theme here at Bullets to Bibles, and we'd love to have you back on to get a little bit more into the weeds with some things. Again, we thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us and share what you did today.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, guys. I had fun. I'm looking forward to being back.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Have a blessed evening, and thank you so much. You want to close us out with a real quick prayer?
I'm going to actually ask Tony to do it this time, and that's not my way of skirting around it.
All right, I'll be glad to.
I'm just going to ask Tony to do it.
All right. Heavenly Father, thank you very much for bringing us together today. Please watch over our new president, and please watch over his cabinet. Please ensure that the safety, the welfare, the strength, and the wisdom of the people that he provides his duty to are always kept at the forefront. Father, we ask this in your name. Thank you for everything you've given us. Thank you for always hearing our prayers. And thank you for this day. Amen.
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 Thank you,
Thank
Sam.
you, Sam.
Take care.